Hey everybody, welcome to Spill the Novelty, where three girlies shout into the void about our latest book hot takes and obsessions. I'm Abby,
I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kaylee.
and this week we're revisiting Maddie's favorite YA book, Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo, which we've talked about doing forever. So if you have read Six of Crows way back when, it was super popular, or if you're interested in hearing what all the hype is about and maybe finally getting around to reading it, here's the tea.
All right, so let's start with Kaz. Kaz is a fan fave. He is a criminal, basically, who is known as Dirty Hands, which I hate, by the way. Kaz is the leader of the Dregs, which is basically a criminal gang, and he's a really, really good criminal. Like, he can kill anyone, he can pickpocket anyone, basically, and he's well known in this world that they live in as this like really good criminal. So he also happens to use a cane due to a permanently like injured or disabled leg, and he wears gloves 100% of the time because he has a phobia of touching other people or other people touching him. So personally, I loved Kaz. Like I think like everyone else, like from the very beginning, he's such a cool character and has a lot of depth to him and has like overcome this disability and a really really real phobia to become like this badass criminal. And I felt like he was like really well written in general. Like he's mysterious and he's intelligent and everyone spreads these rumors about him and like doesn't really know like what the truth is, but they know that he's like scary and you don't want to come across him basically. So yeah,
Yeah.
loved Kaz.
Yeah, I love that. Like, he's so good with human behavior. He knows exactly how to stoke the right fire to get people to believe and act the way that he wants them to act. And we pretty much, like, I think the opening chapter, it's actually the second chapter in the book, but the opening chapter where we meet Kaz is, like, the perfect example of that because he's at this meeting, he reveals he knows he's had a traitor, and he does it in, like, this very, like, a lot of flourish and very clever. And he ends up kind of getting an upper hand on the other man because he threatens his honey, and he's like, oh, there are people on the way to her house right now. If I don't walk out of here, she's toast. But then it's kind of revealed to Inej later that he didn't actually send anyone. And he's like, well, when people believe you'll do the monstrous thing, you don't actually have to do every monstrous thing. And it's just very clever, and I just love it for a character because it's so smart, and I don't know, I just eat it up.
Well, I think it's fun too because something I think that we've kind of talked about is how he, or kind of offline, is like how he really is morally gray, or not even, sometimes not even gray, dark gray. But we also just get these little glimpses of vulnerability and his backstory and his feelings for Inej. And so, kind of to that point, Maddie, like, even though he is this like tough, stoic, dark character who does some pretty like crazy, scary stuff in this book, you still have those little glimpses of that vulnerability, and it's in his personality, it's in the little physical details like the gloves and like the cane that people always have questions about. And yeah, just a brilliantly written character. I get the hype for sure, so big fan.
And he is morally gray, but I feel like the people, not, I'm not saying killing's like a good thing, don't get me wrong, but like the people that he murders are like bad guys. So it's kind of like Dexter, you know, like he's not just going around killing like civilians or anything. Like he's,
I honestly
you know
think
what I
he's
mean?
pretty morally black. Like, there's nothing
You
he
think?
won't do. Like, I mean, especially when you get into his backstory. Okay, this is another part I loved where he walked up to, I think it was the Crow Club, and he was like, I need a job. And they were like, we've got people for everything. Like, we've already got a kid that cleans whatever. And he's like, okay. And he waits for that kid to leave, and he jumps him, slashes the soles of his feet to put him out of commission for months. It goes the next day, and he's like, I need a job. And they're like, we have an opening. Like, that's not, I don't think that's morally gray to me. Like, there's nothing he won't do. There's no person he won't like cross except for Inej, and you see one other forgiveness in the book to Jesper, when Jesper kind of gives up the game to Pekka. And I think normally Kaz would have punished Jesper pretty significantly for that, but he just kind of does like a very, it's a punishment for Jesper, but it's not a punishment like he did to Big Ball in the beginning. So, but other than that, like, he gets weaker throughout the book, I guess is what I'm saying, but the man is morally black in my eyes.
Yeah.
He's crazy.
You have a good, yeah,
he's
good
a
point.
psycho.
I totally agree now.
He's literally crazy.
But I eat it up, though. I love it.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, we excuse it because,
Not in
like,
real life,
he has
but...
his reasons. He has his reasons.
Well, and this is something we've talked about before. Abby, and I know you and I talked about this the other day. But, like, in YA books, especially YA books, but even in, like, new adult books, we get these, like, morally gray characters that are supposed to be so edgy, but they don't actually do anything edgy throughout the series. And so I loved when we get that scene where he actually, like, takes out that man's eye to get him to tell
that scene is
like
wild.
What happened, because you're like, oh, this is like real, like we're serious about this, okay, like, and
then he still throws him overboard, like, you know,
absolutely, exactly, he doesn't care. The deal is not the deal.
The deal,
that's true.
Done.
Yeah.
No, I totally get the hype with him, and you can't talk about Kaz without talking about Inej, of course. So Inej is this like super spy known as the Wraith. She was a former acrobat, and she can basically climb any surface. She is part of Kaz's group, the Dregs, and she can sneak up on anyone without them hearing her. Very quiet. She has this really interesting backstory. And so, like, at risk of saying I loved all the characters, I really did. I thought that, much like the others, her backstory was really interesting. Her time at the menagerie, and as this quote exotic girl, which is really terrible, and just like how her treatment there led to her wanting to leave, and then eventually Kaz inviting her to the Dregs. Her climbing, her skillfulness with her knives, how quiet she is when she's on a mission. I loved her. I loved her and Kaz's dynamic, and great character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree about the backstory, Abby. I thought it was really like heart-wrenching, and especially like in the moments where she came across whatever who was the owner of the menagerie is, like
Helene.
Yeah. Helene. Whenever she like came across Helene in like her world, and then she would like freeze basically and become overcome with like this PTSD of having these experiences of being like beaten by her and all sorts of bad things, and like it was really heart-wrenching. Really, I loved her backstory. Well, like loved it because I hated it, you know.
So,
right.
Yeah, agreed. I think, you know, she's just another great example of like a very complex character that has this rich backstory, and you can see how it plays into like her current actions, even though she's quote unquote beyond it. Like she's moved on to like a new part of her life, but she's not immune to still being racked with fear over something that should rack her with fear, you know, like, and I love her point of view of Kaz too. They have such like a fascinating relationship. You can really see why they start falling for each other and why Kaz starts relying on her, and like she's just so capable and so competent, and she really cares for Kaz. And again, you can see it in that opening chapter where she's like rushing to find the gunman to like disarm him, but Kaz didn't tell her the whole story, so she's like gotta make up for all this because he knows that she can do it, but she's like, well, why couldn't you just tell me? Like I could definitely do it if you just would have told me. And it's like a perfect encapsulation of their relationship and like how they see each other, and why it's so frustrating and difficult to work through for them. I don't know, it's just good. It's good food.
It's good soup. And I think also just like there's something really fun about her being this character who's known for the ability to sneak in and for this ability to, you know, just come in unnoticed. And I think, not to put on my AP English hat here, but it is really sweet that, for someone like Kaz who just has like this wall up with literally everyone, for her to be able
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
pick these little things and read these little things that he thinks that he's keeping secret. And he does keep secrets from her still successfully sometimes. But
Mhm.
she can see through him in a way that, or at least parts of him that no one else can. And I just,
Mm-hmm.
oh, good soup.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
good.
I loved like all those subtle little hints that like they had a deeper relationship than that they were like portraying to everybody else. Like I loved how like when he did keep secrets from her, she took it so personally and was like
Mm-hmm.
he needs to say sorry, like she took it to this like different level. And then like
Mm-hmm.
he had little moments where like he would like go crazy if she was injured, and he would like go kill people and stuff because he was so like torn up about her being injured. And like there were just these little subtle hints that there was something between them, but it wasn't like overt. Like it wasn't like thrown in our faces. We had to kind of like
Yeah.
guess
Dude,
at it.
the on the ship when she's like recovered from the stab wound, and then she kind of just like she's like, "Oh yeah, like Kaz hasn't really talked to me for a couple days, like whatever." And then he finally goes up and he's like, "Here's the incinerator, like can you climb this?" And she's like, "Does it matter? Like I can climb it." And in his like internal thought, it's like, "I've just been looking for an excuse to talk to you for 2 days." Oh my god. Oh my
That
god.
was
Oh,
so
I
cute.
weep, I sob, but like it's just like so real because he is trying not to like indulge in that side of him. He's talking himself through
Mm-hmm.
it like, you don't need to go talk to her. Like, she's fine. Everyone's told you she's fine. There's no reason to talk to her. You have to have a logical reason to speak to her, or else you can't do this. Like, you can't be weak. And it's just so good for both of their characters because she's just so, like, you don't care. And you're like, he does care, but he doesn't care enough.
Yes.
Like, ah.
Yeah. Or
But
like when she
yeah,
touches
he
his
does.
face, when he touches her, or sorry, she touches his face that one time, and you
Mm-hmm.
get
Mm-hmm.
his like internal where like obviously
Mm-hmm.
he loves it and hates it so much at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
but like it's just like this
Yeah.
internal battle for like all of like 2 seconds of like actual
Yeah.
action, if you will. Just
Yeah.
And it's
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 so good.
heartbreaking for both of them, like on both sides, because like he wants to
Mm-hmm.
care about her but he can't, and like she
Mm-hmm.
wants him to care about her but he can't, and it's like really
Exactly.
heartbreaking. But like the moment that I loved the most between them was when Nina has, fast forwarding in the book, when Nina has taken the Jurda Prim
Mm-hmm.
and like her senses are heightened or whatever, and
Yes.
she tells, yeah, when she's like, his breath catches every time he looks at you. I was like, oh my god, that was so cute.
It's so cute. And I love too, like, the relationship, just as a side note, between like Nina and Inej, because we get these really girly pop moments where they kind of talk
Yeah.
about their boys
Yes.
with each other. And like Inej makes comments like to Matthias, and she's like, "Yeah, you fucking hate her, you're so right." And it's just very funny. It feels very real because you would have those girly pop moments with like your pal, it's not just all business all the
It
time.
does. Well,
Especially
and
being in
that
this group of guys, like this guy
Yeah.
dominant, like criminal field that they're like working into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
and I think too, like, as a side note to all that, something that we were talking about was that even though this is a YA, especially for us reading it, like, in our 20s and stuff, I think a lot of times, and this might be a fun thing to look into, like, as we're reading YA, is like how much you can kind of relate to those characters now, and like, can you envision them as like slightly older? And for all of
Mm-hmm.
them, like, it's hard to say if I was reading this back when I was younger. Like, I don't know. I still think I would have imagined them like in their 20s, like a little bit
Mm.
anyway, just because of the nuances of their friendship, how they communicate with each other, the slow burn, being
Mm-hmm.
able to be vulnerable and like really hardened at the same time. Like, there's a lot of behaviors there that aren't YA, but not in a way that makes it feel like glaringly out of place. It's just a maturity.
Yeah, I think this book is a victim of publishing at the time, where I remember like this time, it was very much, if you're not writing about a 16-year-old, no one's going to read it. Like, that was the
Mm-hmm.
only age demographic you could write for in any genre almost.
Right.
And so I think it's very much a victim of that, because I really don't think these characters, I get that they're going through things that make them mature faster, but their ability to problem solve and think critically and think on their feet, I think simply you don't have that until your frontal cortex has formed. Okay, like, I'm so sorry,
Simply.
but like
True.
these kind of complexities and like the ability to compete with these people that have been doing it for years, there's certainly like a natural inclination that comes, but like these people are 24, 25. Be FFR for reals.
Yeah.
Like, I will not accept any
Yeah.
other, and that's like common in the Six of Crows fandom too. So like, I won't be taking any
Yeah.
commentary like Kaz can't be hot because he's 17. No, he's not. Look me in my eyes and tell me he's 17.
No,
You can't.
he's not.
He's
Right.
hot.
Right.
And their
Right.
capacity to like come to terms with death
Yeah.
is way too mature for their age. Because like
Mhm.
for instance, when Inej is like climbing the incinerator,
Mhm.
and she is like, she realizes she's not going to be able to make it, and she just thinks about like, oh, I could fall and like meet my dad again, basically, who's like
Mhm.
dead or whatever. And like little things like that, they're very calm when faced with death, which is like more of a mature feature, I would say. So yeah, little moments like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we also have Jesper in the Dregs, who happens to be a really good shooter, but he also happens to have a gambling problem. He's also secretly a Grisha. Lots of complexities to Jesper, but he's secretly a Grisha with the power of manipulating materials like metal, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
And he doesn't want anybody to know that, like even the Dregs, who are his closest people. So I thought Jesper was cool, but I also thought he low-key had feelings for Kaz, especially in the beginning of the book. I was like, ooh, I really think that that's where this is going. And I still don't really know that that was ever like confirmed. So I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, I don't think the closest he gets is kind of towards the end, where he says something very roundabout, where it's like he let himself care too much for the bastard of the barrel or something like that. But absolutely, I think he had a crush on Kaz at least, and like he idolizes Kaz. He thinks Kaz like walks on water, that's for sure. But you definitely can see his feelings for Kaz in the way that he thinks about Inej through his POV, where he's constantly jealous of Inej and how close she is to Kaz, and he is always trying to center himself around Kaz, and like he feels very happy when he's chosen by Kaz to go on a mission. And I think that's something that I love about Jesper, because it's obviously unrequited. And honestly, I don't, Kaz likes Jess, but like at the end of the day, I think if Jess wasn't a Grisha, like he wouldn't have been selected for this mission, because he was selected for that special weird niche ability that he has, not for his personality or for his sharpshooting. Like, he's a trusted member. Like, Kaz knows he'll be loyal, but like this wasn't a mission where you choose only based on loyalty. And I think Jesper kind of has to come to terms with the fact that he's never going to mean as much to Kaz as Kaz means to him. And I love that for him. It's a tough journey.
Yeah.
And that's the thing again too, is like all these very I just again, knowing that you're a character girly, Maddie, like I think it makes so much sense that this book is one of your faves, because there's so much packed into just that very small group dynamic, but not in a way that feels forced or anything. It's the subtleties, right? And so or like even you mentioning him being jealous of Inej, like that just put two and two together for me. Like I thought that he had a crush on Kaz for sure, but those little things, just like quick little lines that you could easily miss, that add so much. Yeah, my feelings on him definitely evolved, I think, the most during the book out of all of our kind of like main crew. I wasn't super invested at first. I thought it was like not funny, but interesting that, you know, he had a gambling problem, because I think there were some jokes about it and stuff like that. But then just over time, I think he was the character who I became, my feelings for grew the most. And yeah, the fact that he was hiding his abilities was just like such a big, I don't know, big useful reveal during the actual heist. So
I know, I'm so sad. Okay, I couldn't remember like whose backstories get revealed in this book versus book 2. we don't get Jesper's full backstory in this book, and we don't get Wyland's, and I wish we did because they eat so hard. But yeah, it's a whole thing. But also, post ADHD diagnosis, Jesper reads very different to me now, and I love him for that because I'm like, oh my god, girly, she is suffering, like same.
Yeah. Yes, rejection sensitivity.
Constant stimulation. Like, oh my god, the amount of times he starts a fight just because he's like bored and he needs to feel something. Oh, it's so relatable.
Yeah, nope. He is definitely our ADHD representation in this crew. So, love you, Jesper.
Yeah, and then competing for my affections is also Nina. Oh my god, I love Nina. So she's a part of the dregs. She kind of works at a place similar to the menagerie, but she is a heart render. So she's actually trained to like kill people with her powers. There's kind of two branches. It's like you can either go the violent path or the healing path. And she was trained as a soldier. So she's actually best at using her powers to pop eyeballs and like stop blood and pulses and stuff. But the way that she uses her services in her everyday life, which I just think is so smart and like such a cool take on it, is she basically gets clients and she treats anxiety almost, where she like slows their heart rate and calms them down and makes them feel at peace, and like people pay big money for this service, and like it's just very fascinating. And she as a character is so wily and feisty, and she loves sweets, and she's just the opposite of this like very dainty, not like other girls, you know, female main character that we get all the time. She's like, no, I'm hungry, I will be devouring this whole thing. And she's good at flirting and good at talking to people, and she likes, you know, relationships with men, and like she's just like so feminine. And it's so refreshing to see cute. That in a book, because like she's also so fierce, and like one doesn't take away from the other.
Right. And seriously, one of my favorite scenes in the book is when she is first we first get introduced to her, and we think that she's going to be like seducing this client, but really she's just doing the thing where she's like helping his anxiety and like healing his mood. And I thought that was like one of the coolest like character intros, because it was completely different than what you expect. And then she just like afterwards just like plops on the couch and is basically like, what do you want, Kaz? Like, you know. So she's so fun. Love it. I'm here for her.
Yeah, I also loved Nina. I like you, Maddie. I like that she wasn't like other girls, and she's like curvier and like a real woman, and like a real woman that people can relate to, you know. Like I loved that. But we can't talk about Nina without talking about Matthias. I think that's how you say it. It's like Matthias. But he's a former.
Matthias, but in the audiobook, I think he says Matthias. But like, I'm like, girl,
they switch between it in the audiobook. Yeah. Anyway, Matthias, he's a former soldier, and he hates the Grisha, at least for most of the book. And we all know that Nina's a Grisha, but she also like betrayed him a while before this book takes place. I think it was like a year before this. So he wants to kill Nina. And so they have a complicated relationship, to say the least. I personally, like, I know we were supposed to see this redemption arc with Matthias for this book, but like, I thought he was irredeemable. Like, I don't see how Nina can forgive him for like actually trying to actively murder her and saying all of these really horrible things to her. Like,
it was just once. I get why really. He only strangled her the once.
Right, we can get over
just
that.
One time.
Just once.
You know.
Like, no, she should have at least, she forgave him so easily. Like, it was like unconditional love. Like, he did that, and she was still, her inner monologue was like thinking all of these things about how she loved him, essentially. And it's like, bro. Girl, you can do better, queen. Like,
well, I think there's probably just a lot of guilt there too, where she is like convincing herself that maybe not that specific action was okay, but just generally that like she was inviting this on because of what she did. So there's probably some that's clouding her judgment a little bit too, you know. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
think Matthias for me, he's definitely my least favorite. Like I just find him a bit too bland, a bit too moral, a bit too but like that's what he needs to be, you know? He's like a Fjorden soldier. Like that's how he was raised, and I totally get why Lee really wanted to include a POV of someone who's kind of coming out of brainwashing and kind of going through the process of accepting that like what they thought about the world isn't true, and they're kind of having these difficult moments, and he kind of holds together like he's learning that Grisha are just people, and they're really, you know, they can be good and they can be bad and they can be nuanced and blah blah blah. And then he also is simultaneously holding that makes him a traitor to his nation and all of his friends and family growing up. And I really like that he doesn't try to justify that. He just owns both sides. He's like, both can be true. Like I don't have to do mental gymnastics to say like everyone else is brainwashed and blah 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 blah. Like he just takes it on. He's like, I'm a traitor, but I'm doing what I think is right, and it's like the best that I can do right now. But yeah, for the most part, like when I flip the page and then I see like it's a Matthias chapter, I'm like, ugh. I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm also very much here for the like getting out of the religious or like this sort of like patriotic brainwashing trope. But yeah, he just, and hey, maybe I would like him better if all the other characters weren't as good as they are, but he just felt like for sure like the weakest link to me in terms of just being interested. But
which is funny because he's the most important to the heist. Like no, like full stop.
Exactly.
They could not have done a single part of the heist without him because they need his insider knowledge because he used to work at the ice court. So
that's true.
It's crazy.
And so like I get the importance of his character and like his purpose, but yeah, I just wasn't as interested, which is fine. Yeah.
I was gonna say I would have liked him more if he actually betrayed Nina, like during that betrayal scene, like when we actually thought he was like betraying her and like locking her into that cell. I would have liked him more, I think, as a character if that was the case. But then he comes around and then they have this love arc, and it's just like, and yeah, she should not have forgiven him. Yeah.
I just like Nina too much to like him, so
exactly. That's my issue too. It's like I think Nina's too good for him. I'm like, girl, you.
I'm just too in love with Nina to let that slide. Yeah,
I'm like, move aside, Matthias. I will treat her right. You don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Just
he is a bit better in book 2. I keep saying that. Sorry, it's annoying. He's a bit better in book 2 because Nina needs him more, or whatever.
Whatever. Fair enough. The best for my girl. That's all I ask. Yeah. So.
Speaking of underwhelming side characters.
Oh, yeah. We have Wylan. Is that how Wylan?
Wylan, yeah.
And he's sort of an addition that Kaz has recruited for this particular mission. And when we first meet him, he doesn't really have any major skills. Where he knows a couple different languages, which does prove helpful, I think, a couple times. But
he can play the flute, Abby.
He can play the flute, important skill. And the whole gang is basically like, what the hell is he doing here? And it turns out that he is Van Eck's son. So Kaz refers to him as this sort of insurance that Van Eck will pay them and that things will go smoothly. So yeah, we don't get a whole lot of him in this book. I did like seeing the little moments between him and Jesper still too. Like I didn't catch onto that at first, and then I was like, oh, interesting. But yeah, he was served his purpose. He was there. So
yeah,
for me, they were like, sorry, Maddie. They were like kind of like middle school flirting a lot of the time. Like he was like calling him, what was he calling him? Like Jesper was calling him something. I don't remember what it was. Merchling, like little things like that, and it was like, yeah, it was like play school flirting, and
it's really cute. Like when they're escaping, like when they're first getting on the boat and all that is going on, and then he like tells Jesper to close his eyes, and Jesper's like, you can't kiss me from down there. Like, what do you? And I'm like, yeah, so true.
It was cute.
Yeah, it is very cute. Yeah, yeah, this one is tough for me. I remember not caring about Wylan at all. But he like really, really shines in book 2. And I think in this book, I loved his like steady moral decline as he hangs out with the dregs, and like how he kind of enters as like this very scared boy, and then by the end he's like, they can't take me alive, and it's like, okay, let's go. Like he's learned some things. But like, and this isn't even his full backstory, but like the twist that his father is sending him letters that he can't read to mock his disability directly is like one of the most painful things I've ever read. And I'm not even kidding when I say I think about it all the time. I'm so sorry to say that Van Eck ate that up. Like, he really owned his son. Like, that's crazy. It's like the craziest thing, and it made me feel so bad for Wylan. And like, so I can't help but love him because I'm like, oh, baby boy, sad.
I know. I do feel for him a lot, for sure. Like, or even when he's first, you just have like this gut feeling, I think, when Kaz explains like who he is in the beginning. I'm like, oh, I just know that this poor kid has gone through it. I just know. He's just a baby.
Yeah.
So.
And I think he's only 16, right? So he's a youngin out of the group.
He's like the youngest.
He's the younger.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty obvious to me he was just like serving the purpose of progressing the plot, but I still felt for him in those moments too. Yeah. So,
but I want to give him several credits. He comes in clutch many times, and he surprises the dregs even. Like, he's able to quickly come up with like flashbangs and stuff like that to help them in fights. He's able to disable or disarm the gate at the ice core. Like, he's very good at mechanics, and I think it's just a matter of like knowing how to channel his skills, and the dregs were able to do that because they got to know him. But prior to that, just like with his father, nobody knew what he was good at because they didn't bother. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I just want to give him that credit.
Fair enough.
But onwards and upwards to the actual heist, now that we're talking about Van Eck and the gates and all of the things. Basically, the plot of the book is that Kaz is approached by this very powerful mercher called Van Eck, and he wants him to perform a heist with the dregs. There is a man called Bo Yul Bayor. He's created Jurda Parem, which is a drug that makes Grisha basically into like mini gods. And they also become very obedient because it's like very highly addictive. So it's it's very give and take for the Grisha. It's not. It's bad for the Grisha. Nobody thinks this drug is a good thing for the Grisha, but the Grisha are used as slaves throughout the book to serve other people's purposes. So every country wants power of this. So the dregs get hired to go basically rescue this man from where he's being held in the highest security prison in the realm by the Fjordans, which is Matthias's people, who hate Grisha and think they're witches and blah, 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 blah. So anyways, Kaz creates this whole crew. Everyone has like a very specific role that they serve. And they do end up finding where Bo Yul Bayor was kept, but he's dead. And it's just his little son, his little baby boy son, Kuei. And Kuei's like, I kind of know the formulas. I can like hit or miss do it. And so they end up taking him, and they're like, well, this is the best they got. So it is in general a successful heist. There's so many moments where things go wrong and they have to improvise. They're always running late. Nothing goes to plan, but it's like such a good part of the book because you just never know what's going to happen. And I really love that we don't get to know really like the plan of the heist until it's like unfolding, and then because otherwise it'd be so boring. Like, I don't want to sit through like 17 chapters of meetings. Like, call me Jesper.
I so agree with that. I love that Kaz was the only one that like knew the plan and then was kind of telling them as they went. And like once we got to the heist, I was like locked into this book. Like, I was like, okay, I love this, and like I was really looking forward to picking the book back up after like putting it down. Sometimes I will say the events seemed a little too convenient to me, but I was able to get over that because the action was like so good. Like for instance, when Inej was climbing the incinerator and it started raining, and I was like, okay,
It's because of her
of
saints,
course it started raining.
Kaylee. Please.
Okay, yeah, okay.
He
I'm
does
a
Let her
have
have
the
her
hater.
sweetest
religious
moment.
You're right. I'm a hater. I'm sorry.
When her shoes were burning or like melting.
Onto her feet.
Oh man.
Yeah, that sounds horrible.
Yeah.
I don't like
Yeah,
anything
that
having to do with the feet.
Yeah.
yeah, just like that that scene yeah, that scene was truly epic. That was so good. And I also really loved, there's so many little things, but I did really like when Nina like gets the guy to, what's his name? Mm, mm, mm. The one that's
Brum.
like the leader of,
The general.
yes,
Brum.
Brum. Brum.
Brum.
Roomy
Brum.
boy.
Brum.
Broom.
Gets him
Sweet,
to follow her. Now obviously it goes differently than what we expect, and there's like a lot of twists that happen there, but just, I don't know, like, you can, I am sad that the show got canceled, and we were talking about this a little bit, like I haven't seen any of it, but I can just like see this entire like heist just like there, I don't know, jumping around and playing out in my head, and it's
Yeah.
so cool. So I don't, did they show the heist like in the show, Maddie? Do you know, did they get to that point?
I didn't get all the way through it because I hate having to sift through the shadow and bone parts of the show.
Yeah.
But I might revisit it now. Since I'm in my Six of Crows era again. But yeah, I agree, Abby. I love that it jumps around. And they give you really good kind of anchor points to work off of as they're going back and forth in time. Like the Black Protocol bell being triggered, and then you kind of get back to people's POVs, and it kind of brings you back to that, like the end of those chapters is always like, and then the Black Protocol bells rang out, and you're like, okay, now I know where I am and what everyone's been doing. So, and I think that's really difficult to do when you're literally, your people are spread out and they're doing different things all across the place. So yeah, I really liked that part as well.
Yeah, my only complaint with some of the heist is that, and again, it's not even, I don't know like what I expect the alternative to be, because I can't imagine like how hard it is to write this entire thing, you know. There were some moments when we'd have like the flashback, like I think one time it switches to Kaz's POV and it kind of explains like the logic of like everything he had thought through, and like how it all played out, and it felt a little like info dumpy because he's just telling you like what he, like all his plans and like how it ended up playing out, but also it's like that's kind of to be expected because you need to know whether or not his plan went to plan, right? Like you have to, you kind of want to get his POV on how everything has unfolded. So it's kind of hard to say because like it's such a hard thing to write that back and forth and back and forth.
I think it is difficult, and I also think this kind of ties into what you were saying, Kaylee. Like, I agree, there were definitely, they got very lucky in some points, but they also got very unlucky in other points, and I think, for me, this is very much a lesson, like, to Kaz, on how much you can plan and how much it just doesn't matter at the moment. Like, if you don't have the right crew that's able to improvise at the time, you're gonna fail, because everything's gonna go wrong. Like it's just not gonna work out how you intended it to, and you have to be able to think on your feet. And so I feel like the moments where he was kind of thinking logically through things are important, because then it's almost always followed up by something going terribly wrong, or it's following up something going terribly wrong, and it's kind of like, you can plan, you can be the most clever person in the barrel, but like if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And even Kaz, like when he finds out that like basically his like arch nemesis is being held in the ice court, and he almost blows the plans to smithereens because he fucking changes everything at the last second to go try and find this man, because he's like arguing with himself on whether or not he wants to kill him, and you're like, Kaz, stop being unhinged. But he can't, because he's just a boy.
That was great though. When that happened, I thought that he just brutally murdered him. It like took a little break, you know, a little aside to go do that. Like That was it was so good.
And
That's
I
what
love
it
that we
needed.
don't
And so
find
that's
love
out.
that.
exactly
Like, we never get confirmation
Yeah.
or denial until the very tail end of the book when we get Pekka's POV, and I'm like, oh shit, you're alive? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah, that
Dude,
was
I
great.
actually
That was perfect. Especially how he has like blood on his shirt and everything. So like you really assume that he's killed this guy, and then like you get to the end and you're like, oh my god, like yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I
Crazy.
goofed because I was trying to read or I was trying to figure out like what the page numbers were, like how many pages there were in the book, and I accidentally saw that there was a
Oh
Pekka
no.
POV at the end. I was like, no.
So it got
But
ruined for you.
it's so good. Yeah,
Tragic.
that's okay.
Well, speaking of things like not going to plan, the end. So there's this big betrayal at the end. It's really good. Basically, the dregs come back to Ketterdam expecting to get their money from Van Eck, but instead, Van Eck like basically planned to kill them this whole time because he wants to use the Jurda Parem to like make money. So, but like I'm trying to think of even what happened. Sorry.
So
But basically, Kaz is like, yeah, thank you.
the way that Van Eck phrased it to Kaz is Van Eck wanted to do this on behalf of Ketterdam as like a whole country through the Merchant Council, which he's a part of, which is basically like their, leadership. But Van Eck really wants it just for himself, so he can run the markets and he can do it. The other Merchant Council doesn't know anything about this. And so basically Van Eck is making like the greed is the lever, right? Like Van Eck is like, JK, this isn't actually a government issued mission. This was a mission I issued for my own gain. And for that reason, now you have to die because I can't get snitted on.
Yeah. Okay, that clears it up. Well, but turns out Kaz is like, because he's always like 3 steps ahead of everybody, like they've done this whole like switcheroo where the kid, I don't remember his name, the kid of the Jurda Parem makers, his son, named
Kuwei.
what? Kuwei.
Yeah.
Yeah, he and Wayland have like switched places because Nina has like mended them to look like each other. And so Wylan is actually standing in front of Van Eck with them instead of his son, Kuwei. Yeah. So it's kind of confusing. But anyway, that's not all like super important. But like I was expecting the betrayal to happen because it was sort of hinted at and everything was just a little too perfect. Like you're not thinking like, oh, they're gonna run away with their money in the end. Like obviously there's gonna be some repercussions of their actions. But I was not expecting the twist where Kuwei and Wylan are switched. Like that was really, really well written, and it kind of brought us back to the beginning of the story where someone else was like mended to look like somebody else. So yeah, really good, really well written.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, I think again, like the betrayal, it's just expected, like, or not even. It's just that because everyone in this, in this story has their own motivations or anything like that. You know that they're not just gonna, like you said, let them run off with the money. He's just gonna go without a hitch. Yay, it's done. But yeah, the switch was very cool. So
yeah, I think I agreed. The switch was cool. I think though, like, and Kaz even says this, like, he does make preparations for if there is a betrayal, but at the end of the day, he didn't expect there to be one because he is also fallen under the spell that, like, because he's a high-end mercher, like, the deal is the deal. He'll honor the deal. Like, Kaz honors his deals when he makes deals. So surely the Merchant Council does too. And so that's why, even though Kaz has taken these precautions, they really feel more routine than anything else. And the switch is smart. It's just like a safe play, but it's also because Wylan wanted to be there to see if his father actually cared about him at all, which, spoilers, he doesn't. And so anyways, there wasn't enough preparation to actually be prepared for the betrayal, which is why it goes so wrong. And they end up kidnapping Inej because Kaz shows this moment of weakness where they're about to fight. And Van Eck catches that his eyes flit over to Inej. And he's like, that's his weak spot, which is true.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely punishing, like
Ow.
validating every fear he's ever had about like caring about people. Crazy, crazy, crazy. It's a great scene
Ooh.
though.
So good. And also Nina ends up taking the Jurda and basically right before this, so she becomes like addicted to it. That's something that's important to mention. So it's
Oh
like
yeah.
we're all wondering what's gonna happen with Nina, you know?
Yeah, she does it to get
Crazy.
them out
Lots
of
of
the
stuff
ice
happens in
court.
the end of this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's not even present when they get in this fight because she's sick. Yeah, it's crazy, crazy, crazy.
Crazy.
So yeah. Okay, well that was the book. It's time for everyone's favorite part of the pod, our hot takes and pour overs. I'll start because mine are kind of mid. Because I just love this book. I can't even hate on it. So I
That's
don't
fair.
really have like one good hot take. But I wrote down 2 small hot takes. For one, the characters should not have been teens, which we already kind of yapped about. And then for 2, I do think we could have slimmed down POVs. I think for as many POVs as we get, like this is the best possible application of it. Like Lee does a really good job at making POVs count, and you kind of understand why you're having to read this like separate POV. But like, if I'm being honest, like we didn't really need Pekka's POV at the end. Like we didn't really need, you know, I think we really only needed like Nina, Jesper, Kaz, and Inej. Maybe Matthias, but I really think we could have gotten through without Matthias in this book.
Yeah.
Like I think it would
I
have been
agree.
fine. So I would prefer slim down POVs on the characters that we get backstories for in this book and that really matter. And then book 2, kind of you can have space for other POVs to come in when they kind of get more of a spotlight. But yeah, that's my hot take, which isn't, it's like lukewarm at best, honestly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then my pour over is really just the Grisha. I love the magic system, and I love that you kind of have these branches that then have little branches that kind of, you know, just speak to specialties and like skills and stuff like that. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. There's nothing weird. The like Parem powers make sense. Like it's all very logical, and it's a very structured magic system, and that's what I like because I know what to expect. Like when someone tells me this person's a tide maker, I'm like, okay, I immediately understand like what they can and cannot do. It's not just like,
Yeah.
well, if she's feeling a little sad, like she can make it rain. It's, you know, like I like it's very straightforward. It's plain.
Yeah.
And that
easy to
I like
understand.
the creative uses of it too, though, of like, again, with Nina, you know, like how we see how they use it to their advantage in particular situations. So,
Yeah.
agreed.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go next. So my hot take, I think the third person POV throughout the book was a huge cop out to be a little info dumpy, like especially when we were like reading those initial chapters from each character from in each POV, and it was like it would randomly go into like the character's backstory. It wasn't like really tied to much that was happening in the moment. I just thought using third person POV was a way to give us their backstories and everything without like being in the moment and them thinking like like natural thoughts, because you wouldn't sit there and think like if I was sitting there and doing something, I wouldn't think like, oh, remember when this happened when I was a child, and then think about the entire chronological like events that happened in that moment. You would think more like spotty, like, you know what I'm saying? Like I felt like it was a cop out.
I do get what you're saying, but I don't know that first person POV really solves that issue, because I feel like we get the same thing, like when it's a flashback or not. Like I'm trying to think of if I've ever, I don't know. I don't think I've maybe I'm just not bothered by the same thing, because as long as it's in context, like related to like why they're acting the way they're acting in that moment, I think it's fine for me. I don't know. It's interesting. I haven't thought about POV in that way.
Yeah, I think for me, it might be kind of more the point of like, again, just me being Matthias hater, as I know I'm supposed to be to a degree, but I think it might just be that because there's so many of them, because I actually for like and maybe I'm just biased because of how much I like Kaz and everything, but I kind of like when we would go back and we'd get like the full like
Same.
little anecdote, but I don't necessarily want that for everyone because I don't care enough for everyone. So maybe that's what it is too, like, or at least for me, like I don't know that I cared enough about the Matthias and Nina thing. Again, it wasn't bad. Like my complaint for this book is something like that, which is that the backstory for them is still better than a lot of backstories that I've read for other characters before. So like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess what I'm saying, okay, what I'm getting at is like, if you have POV shifts, it should be in the first person.
That's crazy.
It shouldn't be in the third person.
That's a hot
because
take.
it's all written the same. Like when I was reading through POVs, I forgot which character we were reading. It sounded the same as the other characters because it wasn't in first person POV, which is like a huge cop out because that means that the author wasn't as good at writing like POV shifts, in my opinion. Like they couldn't switch between characters. So yeah, that is a hot take. Sorry.
It's actually so funny that you said that. I was about to say the exact opposite thing. I was about to say when you have this many POVs, first person would make me want to kill myself because I cannot keep track in first person. Like no, shut up. Like just tell me the character, because at least then when you're reading it, you still can follow the story even if you forget whose chapter it is. Because it's all the same names and stuff.
But then why have a POV shift? Like why not just keep the story going? And because if you're just gonna say the character's name, why even do a POV shift?
Because the POVs are different. Like they tell you different things. The way that each character perceives the other characters is unique to that character's thing. Like the way that Inej talks about Wylan is very different to how Jesper talks about Wylan. The way Jesper talks about Kaz is very different to how Nina talks about Kaz. And I think if you did a line by line comparison, it would be easier to tell. But
or like body language a little bit. I think one thing I do kind of like is that particularly with like, or okay, like if we're in Kaz's POV and he talks about like knowing that Inej is there because of like the space around him, like there's like a sensing of her there in a way that I don't know that like Jasper's POV, you know, he might know that like she's the Wraith, but like he doesn't feel her the way that her presence, the way that, you know, Kaz does, but it's kind of more through the descriptions of like,
it's through their relationships with other characters. Matthias probably talks about Jesper once or twice in the whole book because he doesn't care about Jesper. But how much does he talk about Nina? Like it's the same world through that lens, and so you see different characters rise and fall in priority through the POVs. But I'm also
right. So why not be first person POV?
Because it would be super confusing with 17 POVs.
I just disagree.
I hate first person. I think we should get rid of it. I can't stand it in a book. I'll be honest.
We should get rid of it.
I'm sick of it. I think it's
first
really
person.
bad to cop out, honestly.
But wow, we have like the complete opposite.
Yeah, we're exact opposite. That is funny.
I love it.
Spicy take.
Yeah.
Okay, hot take.
Okay.
All right, what's your pour over, Kaylee?
Just Nina. Like I want to know what happened to her. What happens to her because I really like Nina. So yeah.
With Double Girl. Okay, my hot take. I've already said this. I was supposed to care about Matthias, but I don't. So, yeah. I understand his purpose and, you know, his relationship with Nina, but I just wasn't that invested. And that's okay. It's because I was so invested in everyone else, so that's fine. And then my pour over is similar to yours, Maddie, just the various Grisha abilities. I love the fabricator, right? I didn't listen to the audiobook. I assume that's what it is because that would make sense. Yeah, just obsessed. Really cool. I love when Jesper there's like a scene where I guess he essentially like throws or kind of like forces all the like little shrapnel or like pieces of metal, I think, and I can see that so viscerally, and that's really cool. So
And what if I told you that the reason he's such a good sharpshooter is because he can actually move the bullets?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
What if I told you?
what if I told you? Brilliant. I love it. Love it.
All right, so let's end off with our ratings and favorite parts. So my rating, very high, was a 4.8 out of 5. Like, I seriously love this book, but I can't rate it a perfect score because of what I just mentioned about the POVs and the little bit of too convenient moments that I didn't love so much. But 4.8, really high. And my favorite part was probably the part where we thought Matthias was betraying Nina, because I was on the edge of my seat and like I didn't see that coming. So I thought that was really good.
Fair enough. My rating is a 5 of 5. This is a perfect book for me. I love it. I never stop talking about it. I'm a third person limited girly. I'm realizing if I wrote a book, Kaylee would probably hate it because I write very similarly to Lee Bardugo. She's way better than I am, but like style wise, very similar. That's okay. I'm coping.
I mean, I still rated it a 4.8. So obviously I love this book, you know? So I would still love your book.
Okay. Maybe I'll kill my main character for you and then get you back on board.
Yes. Yes. 100%. 5 out of 5 every time.
5 out of 5.
My favorite part is definitely the incinerator climb with Inej. I just was like literally on the edge of my seat the whole time. I was so worried for my girl. Rubber was melting to her footsies, which are really important. I actually loved, it's difficult for me to like buy into like a religious character, but the way that Inej does it and the way it's written, I was so into it. I was like, saints help this girl. So yeah, that was like a shining moment in the book for me for sure.
That's an awesome scene. Mine, I'm also gonna go like 4.8, 4.9. It's basically a perfect book. The only reason is because I'm not normally a heist girly, so like there are moments where I just wasn't feeling heist, but it's not because I didn't like the book. It's just because that's not as much my vibe. But I am obsessed with this. The characters are just like best character writing I think I've seen in a YA. Like I'm hard pressed to find another YA that does it better. Yeah, I've already handed this one off to my fiance as well because he is a heist guy. So he was like, I want you to read that next. So we'll have to get Sam's take on it. I think he'll love it. But yeah, love it. Great book. Favorite part, the initial deal. This is kind of like a random one, but the kind of opening with like the initial deal that he's making with which gang I forget, but there you literally just again you can see just with her descriptions and everything, you can just like see it and like feel the tension in all these scenes from like every vantage point, which I think is just crazy. Like Inej is, on the roof, Jesper, and then the which was the crew member that gone. Yeah. I mean, you can just feel the tension like in every part of that entire scene, and it's just so good. I immediately like what an opener too for you to like really understand Kaz and to be drawn in by him. Just immediate buy-in. Like what a hook. She killed that. So shout out Lee Bardugo. That was like one of the best early scenes / intros that I've read to a book ever, I think. So
yeah, you're so
killer.
For that.
So good. So good.
All right. If everyone has said their piece, that's all the tea that we have on Six of Crows. I could go on for another 8 hours, but no one wants to hear that. Next time, we're going to continue the YA train with Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. Prayers up. You can also stay up to date with the latest tea on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube by following us at Spill the Novel Tea on all of the things. While you're there, let us know, did this book live up to the hype for you? Are you a third person POV hater, my enemies? Or did you like this? Was this good YA for you? Do you think they should be 25? Please agree. Please let us know. How hot do you find Kaz Brecker? Do you think Matthias is worth the time? We don't. I'm just saying. Let us know, and we will see you next time.
Bye.